Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Complementary Therapies talk. And today we have a special guest that has something very special to share with us. She is doing something quite unique. We don't see that very often, yet there is some that are doing the same around the world. We have Sarah Munn, that is from Australia. And Sarah is basically an occupational therapist. And I think it's 2012, Sarah, you will correct me, you created Barefoot Therapist in Australia. And among the service that you are doing is giving service with animals, specifically horses. So you are facilitated animal therapist or equine therapist, isn't it? It is.
Yep, that's right.
Well, first of all, Sarah, thank you for joining us today anyway, right?
You're welcome. It's lovely to be here.
And we have another friend behind us. Can you introduce this friend behind you?
Oh, that's Goldie. That's one of our horses. We've got 7 horses here. She's one of the smallest. She's a miniature horse. So she's just having some hay there in the background.
She's enjoying herself.
Yeah, she would have had kids with her today.
Oh, right. So talk a little bit about your journey, Sarah, because you didn't start your career as a equine-assisted therapist. You were mainly occupational therapist, right? You started there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I did occupational therapy, which, is just a regular allied health profession. And over here, that's a 4-year degree. So I qualified in 96 when I was in England. And we're going to have people in the background possibly now. One of our groups of children is on the move. You're looking at those. I broke it. Oh dear. It's a little nest with some eggs. I'm actually sitting at our nature table here. One of the kids wanted to come and have a look. So we might be interrupting you, Lucy.
Hi.
Go on. I got kicked out of my usual shed because there were power tools and the children were making things and it was so noisy I couldn't sit there. So I thought I might get peace down with the horses. But anyway, so OT is, we sit alongside speech pathologists and physiotherapists and dietitians, and there's a whole bunch of allied health professionals, and we really usually work in a very medical model. And mostly my career has been a lot of schools and hospitals and, just usual healthcare. And then when I was 40, I had my first child and he was born with Down syndrome, as it happens, and then was later on diagnosed with autism, as was my other son. So they've got autism and ADHD and all sorts of issues going on for themselves. And so I took a little bit of time out of work and then I really wanted to get back into private practice and work with my neighborhood really and help out, the local kids, because I was quite an experienced pediatric therapist by then. And the journey with my own boys was that I didn't really want them spending their childhood in clinical waiting rooms and waiting to be, treated by professionals involved in the sort of medical model so much. So although we use a lot of the learnings from, our medical model and, what we learned at uni and all of those evidence-based practices, we really started to include working alongside animals, using more mindfulness, slowing it all down, being with nature, and actually learning how we could help. Not heal so much. These children aren't sick, they just need some encouragement with their development, but using nature and including animals, and then the naturally therapeutic benefits alongside what we already knew.
Yeah, but equine therapist is now a degree in school, I believe. You do not improvise yourself. Like, it's good to be in contact with animals and nature, but having, I would say, an organized approach is something else also. How did you got, first of all, with horses, and how did you develop yourself as a equine therapist, equine-assisted therapist?
So I did my training in equine facilitated learning. There aren't any postgraduate degrees or qualifications in Australia. So most people working in the sector, there are courses you can do, but you don't have to have done a course to work in the sector, which is a bit concerning. I did equine facilitated learning though, and worked with therapists with a similar background who had an interest in horses, usually from different backgrounds. So either from training horses or riding at a professional level, or one of our staff used to run a riding school and is now a psychologist. So, you know, different kind of backgrounds. But for me, it was really about learning how to watch the horses, how to include horse behavior. And then I think as an OT, I was very driven to want to care for the horses with the children. I mean, it's children that we see. So there's lots of different ways people work with horses in equine-assisted therapy. And I think it's actually a very unregulated profession, and that makes it quite difficult. There's different standards depending on who you trained with. The mental health and counselling sector have a very different approach to me. I tend to include lots of farm activities as well with my equine therapy. So I feel like I have just morphed it together myself, really. Even though we have a structured approach, it's not something really I was taught. It's more something I've built, I think, now.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, but if you choose to work with horses, it might be because you love them, right? What was your first contact with horses? Is it in your family? When did you start to being in touch with them? Because they're beautiful as you're small, there, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, I rode as a child through secondary school, those years from sort of 10 to 18. My mum was actually a horse trainer, and she used to teach kids to ride, and yeah, we used to do all those kind of things. And so I was thrown on the back of horses. She was starting the first rider up and all that kind of thing from about 12 years old. So, and then for a long time through my adult life, I worked in London for a long time, and I didn't have horses. And then more recently,
Hi, Mum.
hello. That's my son. He's doing some work down here. Yeah, so then it was later in my adulthood that I, you know, after I'd had my children, in fact, and I said, right, I want to get a horse again. It was something I wanted to get back into. And so I initially just got a horse for myself to ride again.
Yeah.
So and then I got.
You knew them already.
I knew them, and I knew how to be around them. And then I got Goldie, and there's another little miniature as well, and I got them for my boys when they were preschoolers. And then by then I had my OT practice up and running, and I was like, some of the children I'm seeing, they just need to come and give the horse a carrot and a pat, you know. They don't need to see me in a clinical room or a school room. They need to see me in a different environment. And that's when I started looking into being able to get, you know, the children out to where I live, my property where I live. And then, yeah, we just grew and we got more horses and more staff.
So tell me, Sarah, these animals are just fantastic, and they're like lovely animals, and they're very intelligent and very emotional animals. But I suspect that the therapist approach, or I would say the scientific background behind it, is that they have the power to help the people to cope with some situation. I know that around the world, It is used for example, veteran Parkinson. It is used for so many things. How can you explain that to us? How does it work?
Magic.
I believe you.
There is something magical about it. And look, the evidence out there for equine-assisted therapy isn't terribly robust. There's some evidence around, things that are more measurable, like, for example, the hippotherapy, which is the riding of horses for therapeutic benefit, often with children with cerebral palsy or something like that, where you can actually measure what's happening with joints and muscles and tone and things like that. So there's more research for that than there is equine-assisted therapy, where the horse is, very much part of the relationship, the change in mood, anxiety, those kind of things for the participant. And look, I think the interesting thing is horses communicate through body language and energy. I believe a lot of it's energy. So when we work with a horse, one of the first things we might do is have a child to, get the horse circling around. So on a lunge line, and the horse will be circling around. And they can get it trotting, and it can be going quite fast. And one of the first things we teach them is, if you breathe in and then breathe out, the horse will stop and look at you.
Oh, really?
And so that's pretty amazing. But for the horses, it's probably fairly, natural behavior, because everybody's running away from something out there on the prairie. And, the lead mare goes, we can stop and look around, and everybody stops.
Oh.
So they look to the lead mare for, where are we going then? What are we doing? Are we stopping? Are we running? So, we tap into some of that stuff to really help people feel empowered. But I mean, the horse is just doing, obviously, if you get a new horse and you're going to circle it for the first time ever, it's not going to just naturally, settle down and do that. So you might have to work with the horse a lot of the time on the ground to build trust and relationships, and be able to go into their space, come out of their space, listen to what they're saying, and get a dance where you can end up walking together, what they call liberty, where the horse is with you without a halter and a rope. But you can, people do amazing things in liberty, where they can have the horses trotting next to them and going over jumps and pointing and, getting them doing all sorts of things. But an early step for that is just hanging out with a horse in a paddock and having it want to walk beside you and want to be part of your herd. And so that's the kind of thing.
Something happened out of that, and something happened. And something happened.
And I think what happens for the people that are involved in that is they are so big and powerful and majestic, and they have personalities, and they don't always want to be with you. And yet when they choose to, and they choose to, walk with you, it's the most incredible feeling, really. And if they walk away, you do a lot of work around, well, why might they have walked away? Why aren't they wanting to be with us at this moment in time? And sometimes people will say, well, I was actually in a really bad mood on the way here, and I really didn't want to be here, and I've had some bad news, or they're not coping with something. Or it might be, some of the kids that we see might not talk so much, but they may have very high energy ADHD or something going on. And so in those cases, the horse is going, I don't feel terribly safe with you at the moment, I'm going. And so then you can work with the person on, okay, so how are you now going to change your body responses? Let's think about your breathing. We know we can stop the horse when he trots around us by using our breath. So how about we use our breath to try and, get him back? Let's wander over again, and let's try it differently. But let's actually reset ourselves first on an energy. I don't work in energy like you do, but you kind of know if your energy is all wonky, then you can do a bit of that work for yourself. So that would lead us into doing some mindfulness away from the horse, to go back to the horse and say, can you trust us a bit better now we're not quite so flighty? And then the horse might come back. And lots of people say the horse will mirror our emotions. So if we're feeling anxious, and we don't really trust ourselves and we don't really want to be there, the horse will take off and do the same. If we're feeling centered and relaxed, your horse will come straight over and pop its, maybe pop its head on you and even want to really nuzzle into you for safety and security and friendship.
So the horse can feel the person. I heard so many stories, like in Equine-Assisted Therapist, I've seen some horses that were feeling the sadness, the loneliness, or something wrong with the person, and just went automatically there to like share or like in a helping manner. That was just amazing. So that, and as you said, they have a personality, they sense things, no? Do they?
Yeah, they do. They definitely sense things. And I also have a feeling that some horses will sense what the children actually need them to do. And so we have a girl who comes to see us, and she won't mind me sharing her story. She has very severe Tourette's and ADHD and autism. And one of her tics at one point was to jump in the air and lie down on the ground and roll over. And she would run away from her mum. She may need to be restrained in the car, so she didn't open the car door and get out, which they were traveling along. And she was about 9 when she started coming to see me. And her mum felt that she'd never been more than a metre or two away from an adult because she was unsafe on her own. And I was like, well, we'll be okay. We got lots of space. And had her working with a little Arabian pony I have, who is hypersensitive and always, oh my goodness, what's happening? And this pony just connected with her and knew what to do. And you could almost, if you were going to humanize it, you could almost sense her going, okay, you actually need me to be still for you.
Wow.
And they got this connection where, this girl would have these tics, and it would be, and vocal tics and big body movements and things. And she'd work with this pony, and I'd work with her too to say, how are we going to be with Star today? And some days she might say, I don't actually feel that safe to be with the horses quite yet, because I've got a lot of energy. So we do lots of jobs. I'd be, okay, let's get the wheelbarrow. Let's go and muck out some paddocks. Let's carry water buckets. And this is a child that can't carry a drink. She can't write because she throws the pen. She can't carry a meal to the table because she will. And yet she could carry these water buckets. She could carry the feed buckets.
Oh, really?
She could use the wheelbarrow. And she was so motivated to be here. And so we do a lot of that heavy work. So that really helped to ground her and give her some proprioceptive feedback and lots of that stuff to get her a bit more centered. And then she'd know when she was ready to return to the horses. And she would have these horses offline, no halter, and she'd trot and they'd trot beside her. And they'd practice stopping, and then they'd practice going, and she'd see if she could keep them with her. And just, amazing ability of the horse, sometimes to just kind of sense what's needed. And I don't think that always happens. People talk about, about that and these connections and the horses kind of doing this stuff. And sometimes I'm a bit, skeptical. I'm a bit, a lot of them are just quiet horses that are doing what they're trained to do. But occasionally you see things like that happen, and you think, wow, that partnership has developed so quickly.
Magic.
And it's magic. And I don't really want to put science to it.
So there might not be a science behind it, but you can at least do the observation. That children was an artist, right? Autistic.
Yes.
Yes. Do you see, I would say, long-term improvement in the condition of the child even after you've done your therapy? Is it a long-term therapy? Does the child has to go for a year, for a month, for how does it work? And what is the sustainability of that approach in the therapeutic sense?
Look, it depends. I mean, for some people like her, she's probably learned a few anxiety management techniques. But I don't, if I'm honest, I wouldn't know that that's had a massive generalization to other functional daily activities. But what it did give her was an opportunity to come and relax. And it was the only place she was relaxed. And it was the only place that she was away from other adults. So that for her own well-being was massive. Other children, you know, you may well do a few sessions with somebody who has who really just needs to do some talking therapy but won't sit and talk with anybody. And so you might say, well, you know, maybe we just need a bit of a coaching model. You know, you're not wanting to go to school, you're having some issues, your anxiety's high, you know, you have a fairly good support structure, but you're not wanting to access it. And we might just do, you know, 8 sessions with somebody like that to get them back on track and back into the services that they're used to having for support. We have other children that come for years, particularly children with intellectual disabilities, and they come and they do vocational work, and they learn a lot about relationships and collaboration and cooperation, and they work in groups. They work with the horses, and they learn how to really look after them, how to follow a recipe, how to measure out their feed. You know, they learn all their fractions and things like that. You know, they need a half a scoop, they need a quarter of a scoop. So we do lots of that more academic stuff with those children, and they can come for quite a long time. I think one of the things we do is we integrate a lot of work around self-regulation.
Yeah.
And so we find that it's, for some children, they come here having been to our clinic, and then the therapist there, we've got 15 therapists altogether. So yeah, so not all of them are horse people who can handle the horses and be around the horses. So they might have done another program, and they might say, look, we really think they need to do one of the outdoor programs. So we have a nature program, and then our farm-based program, and our horse program. And so we will look at who are we going to choose and why for the different therapies. And I think the kids that do the best with the horses are those who have learned the self-regulation in a controlled environment, but they're not using it. So they can tell you all the answers to their, you know, what color zone they might be in, if you're using the zones of regulation and all that kind of stuff, but they can't actually apply it in the playground, for example. They might still be lashing out if they get provoked, or being very impulsive, or not having friends, and that kind of thing might still be happening in the playground. We find then with the work with the horses that we can take that another step around relationships, and a lot of that is about empowerment of you. If you can stop a horse that's cantering around on a rope by breathing, you can control a lot more in that social group than you think you can. But first you need to stop and breathe. And
this I did not know. You're teaching me something today that is completely new for me, because energy is breathing, right? And prana, energy is breathing. I'm a therapist. I'm an energy healing therapist. And if we don't breathe, we don't make the energy, the prana, the shakti, the chi, whatever you call it, to circulate. And now you're telling me that to breathe is something that is important, a way of communicating with the horse, isn't it?
Yes. And even when you ride a horse, if I want to slow my horse down, I must slow down my breathing. If I want to ride him softly, you know, if I don't want to be using lots of kicking with my legs and pulling with my reins, I can let go of my reins and not put my legs on him at all. And I can change my breathing and my posture and make him go faster. I can sit deeper, breathe out. My horse will, if I breathe out completely, my horse stops when I'm riding him. I don't need any reins.
Very, I am very impressed.
But actually,
the more I think there is magic.
I know, but actually you can teach, you know, most horses, if they haven't been spoilt by being overtrained, and most people, you can teach them to do it because it's quite natural for the horse. And especially if you do it on the ground and they're used to it. One of my sons who has Down syndrome, he has a pony, and I taught his pony to stop when I breathed out because I didn't want it running away with him, because he can't ride very well. And if he goes around a corner, he'll likely fall off. So I've taught him to stop her by breathing, because sometimes he'll hold his reins too long. He's not in the right position. So if he pulls on those reins, it's not going to work. So we do a lot of work on that. And I just call it, well, it's anxiety management, isn't it? It's good to be able to breathe.
Yes.
But yeah, you change a lot of what happens with the horse through breath.
Right. So when you start to work with horses, I guess that you do not take random horses. You have to train them a little bit before you start to work with the horse and the student. Do you? You
No,
don't.
I didn't. I took random horses. One of them kicked and bit and was horrible.
No, but not training.
Everyone would think I was mad. No, I didn't. I got a horse for myself who is a very difficult mare. She's very, very moody. And so we all had to learn, some boundaries around her. Yeah. But, I mean, I've kept all of the horses that I've had and worked with them with the children. And so I'll say to the children, we just got this horse. I got a new horse for myself to ride about 18 months ago, who was an Arabian, a very lively horse in some ways. And I said to the children, he's never been led by children. He doesn't know how to do this. We'll have to teach him. Mm-hmm. How are we going to do that? What's a safe way to do that? And they all fell in love with him, and he likes the work. We don't overwork our horses. I will say that none of the horses are in working 9 to 5, 5 days a week or anything. They all have downtime with our therapists as well, where we will do some relaxation for the horses, because they can hold a lot of tension. I think they hold a lot of what's given to them. So there's maneuvers you can do with the horses, like flexing their neck, for example. There's certain movements which will help them really let down, and you'll see them sigh, or they'll yawn, or they'll do these different things to sort of release that. So we will do some of those sessions with our horses too. So we look after their health as well. But yeah, no, we didn't get specially trained horses. The kids have trained them with me, really.
Yes. Okay, can you just I can't wait can you bring the camera to this beautiful horse behind you? I want to see it.
Hi, darling. Hello, Poppy. There you go. We can go and see some in the paddock if you want. You want to come over and say hello? Oh. So we do lots of sensory meditations and things like that, where we'll say, what can you feel with your skin? What can you hear? You can hear them when they're eating. That grum sound. Trees and the birds and things like that. So we do lots of those kind of natural meditations. To experience that things don't always go their way, that the horses don't always come up, they don't always want to play.
Because they have a personality.
Yeah, and they have a choice. And just like the kids don't always want to go to school, and it's not always easy, and they want to run away, particularly the kids on the spectrum, those kids with autism, they often want to run away from when people approach them and ask them to do something difficult. So it's a really good way of them to empathise. Yeah, so it's an interesting field, but it's funny how we started off wanting to do the horses, and more we started to wonder, is it the horses that are doing them good, or is it actually just being on the farm and doing some of these different activities around animal care? So, the looking after the horses, as well as, the sort of training and the being with them. And I think we do more of that than a lot of other equine-assisted therapists would. We don't focus as much on, the counselling side of it. We focus a lot on, bilateral integration, coordination, fine motor skills. There's so much that we want to do as occupational therapists around being able to, sequence a plan and be able to, perform something complex, that might need a lot of cognition or whatever, those kind of things. And we've just found that we do so much of that kind of stuff out here as well, that it's not just the relationship with the horses. It's also, very much all of those other physical, cognitive, motor processes as well that you can impact on.
So
the kids are so motivated; they want to come. Like, can I come next week? It's like, yeah, of course you can. They want to be here.
Yeah, of course, I can understand that. I'm very jealous, actually, right now, not to be there.
I know. Well, we do sometimes include parents as well, because if we occasionally we might have children with terminal illnesses or something like that, and we want to be able to say to the parent that brings them, we'll tie up a horse for you, and you can do some grooming too, and you can join in. So yeah.
So you founded Barefoot Therapist, right?
Yeah.
You decided to, because just a normal clinic cannot suit the horses, and also, what was your sources of inspiration for that?
Look, I think, when I came back into work after having had my kids, I just worked on my own, had a few clients, worked a day a week, and that grew. And then I took on a couple of more therapists because my phone kept ringing, and I thought, well, I can clearly get some other people to do some work with me. And then the clinic idea then just kind of grew, and it really grew. I wouldn't say I was particularly wanting to grow a big practice, but now it is. When I look at it, I'm just going to sit back down in here.
Yeah, sit back here. So the telephone was ringing, and you decided to found that organization, right?
Yeah, so we just kept going, and now we've got 15 therapists. I think we've got 22 staff altogether. And it really was a response to need. It really was that we didn't market anything, we didn't advertise anything, and we were like, people want this, they need it. So and I think what inspired me to do it differently was being able to reflect on my own children, and we were finding it difficult to get the kind of services we wanted. It was difficult to get professionals that were properly trained, who were doing it a bit differently. Yes, we could take them to the riding school and they could have riding lessons. We could, take them to all sorts of things, doing nature and doing this, that, and the other, but they weren't necessarily trained professionals who could help them with their complex diagnoses. The kids that had, my boy with Down syndrome, he's got a list of about 20 different things going on with him, from sleep apnea to, ADHD and a whole range of other things, vitamin deficiencies, and lots of things that were affecting his life. And we couldn't really find anyone that was a trained therapist doing something different. And I didn't really want to just keep taking him to a clinic. So that inspired me a lot. And then when his younger brother, they're 10 and 11 now, the boys, he's got very high functioning autism, which he talks about openly, but he has a whole different set of challenges for himself. And he's doing great now, but when he was at kinder, he struggled a bit. And, I kind of thought, what's the best kind of help for these children? And it came from that. I think that inspired me.
Right.
To set up an environment where everybody wanted to come.
So you cannot improvise yourself, right? Because if you do not know what's going on, if you cannot understand the diagnosis, if you cannot understand the profile of the patient, you can't really understand what to do. And you cannot improvise yourself as a therapist, right? You can't. If you don't understand what's going on with the so-called patient, how can you do any intervention, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, all my staff, I expect them to have a high level of understanding from their training and their reading of research and all of that. so that, I mean, you know, we do improvise a bit. We use a lot of creativity in our sessions. They don't need to have lots of structure. We want to follow the children, but what we do want to do is make sure that we put in as much evidence-based practice as we can alongside the stuff that has not been researched, because nobody's researching it. And it's not that it doesn't work, it's just that there's not been a really good research study done with with any decent, statistical data. Right. So, we kind of mix up a bit. I mean, now there is more stuff coming in for things like mindfulness, and it's great. We're getting more and more evidence all the time. But we wanted to be able to say, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to keep what we knew was good in OT or speech or psychology. They're the main three that work with us with the horses. We want to keep that usual practice that we do in the clinic. Yeah. I just want to make it even more potent because of the child's level of motivation and the different tools and activities you've got available with the horses or on the farm in general. Because there's only so much you can do with a table and a bunch of games in a clinic room, no matter how creative you get.
Would you like to do some research? Because right now, as you know so much the horse, you are one of the best to do that kind of research, don't you?
I would like to. It's just time. But I would like to. I'm very interested in how much the child's motivation affects their therapy as well, because I have a strong feeling that much as everyone thinks it's the magic of the horse, I think there is a lot in that, particularly around more that counselling kind of group. But I genuinely feel a lot of our kids don't need a counselling approach. They don't want to talk about it, and they're not going to, even if there's a horse there. And so you're going at it from a very different, maybe a bit of cognitive behavioural therapy, maybe some experiential, some sensory, some very different kind of approaches, which we know well. And I don't know where I was going. What was I saying? I've lost my train of thought.
You were saying that you have enough, maybe enough stuff ready to start a research project.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. And it's that's right. I was talking about motivation. So I think that the motivation that we have to be able to then put those things into place, the kids want to come, they want to engage in it, they so want to do it. And that's, I think, such a big part of it. And I know even when I go back to my OT training in the early 90s, and intrinsic motivation was a massive interest to me. It was such a big area of interest. So it doesn't surprise me I've ended up doing something that is motivating for people. Yes. And doing nature and being, and yes, it's a nightmare with insurance if you want to do tree climbing, and bike riding is the other thing we do on the farm here, teach kids to ride their bikes. But, those are the things that motivate children. These are the activities of childhood. Yeah. And that's what we should be working with, not standardized assessments and plastic toys.
Yes. So have you had other clientele as elderly people, veteran people, or all sorts of, or only children? You are only working with children?
No, we're a children's practice. I do some groups for mums and dads and carers. We've done a few with adults, but generally it's children. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but a broad range of diagnoses. We have some children referred down from the Royal Children's Hospital, so they might come for rehab. We've had people with post brain surgery for cancer come down. We've had some children with strokes. And then a whole host of more mental health, mental well-being, and then developmental conditions. So a whole range of conditions around that. But we're a children's service. We have a lot of adults want to come, and we just had to say, no, we're going to focus on what we do and do it well.
Yes. That's your focus.
Yeah. And I think too, you know, we could be busier, we could have more kids, we could do bigger groups, but one of the things we've decided here is that we don't want to get lots of, it's not about getting bums on seats and getting them through. It's the experience is about knowing the name of everybody here. It's about being able, if you do stop and listen, to hear the birds. It's not about creating something so big that the therapeutic benefit might be, you know, watered down. So that's been quite intentional. We also don't want to work our horses too hard. So, yeah.
Now, Sarah, tell me the most surprising thing that happened that you didn't expect with a child, a patient, a case study. What can you remember that surprised you, touched you the most in your career? But you worked a lot with horses, and you said that it's magical, right? So I guess that you have been witnessing some magical thing. Can you tell us what happened, the most surprising thing that happened in your career?
Oh, there's been quite a lot. There's been quite a lot. I mean, certainly some of the children have come down and been petrified of horses, not wanted anything to do with them. And before you know it, they are, you know, just engaged, smelling them, touching them, leading them, and that might take a while. That might take weeks of, you know, intervention. We've had quite a few kids come that can barely walk and certainly can't run, and after a few sessions with us, they're running, jumping over little poles with the horses, setting up, and we get them to set up obstacle courses and pick up, you know, heavy poles and things like that for strength and coordination. So kids that have literally come in very, very weak, that are motivated to run with that horse. And that's the motivation. And, you know, they're running over, they might be falling over and the horse is stopping. You're going, but yeah, we've had a couple of children like that learned to run here, and older children too, who just either physically or fitness wise couldn't. One child had been in a wheelchair for 2 years, and she could barely walk through the gate, and she ended up, you know, running around with one of the horses.
Wow.
Yeah. And another boy who his mum said he doesn't run, he can't run, and he has cerebral palsy, but he was determined to do what the other children were doing, and so he ended up being able to actually jump over these poles, which people didn't think would be possible. And then one girl in particular who she was older, she was about 16, and she had refused to go and see anybody, refused to see the GP, wouldn't see a psychologist, wouldn't go to school, we've had a few that have been completely reclusive and shut down, really not seeing anybody. We've had kids where we've started working in their bedroom, just trying to get them to come out from under the blanket. And if that's where we need to start, that's where we'll start. They don't have to come here. But to see one girl particularly turn around to the point that she learned to handle all her horses, she learned to go into the herd and bring them out one by one with a halter. She learned to do all of their feeds and clean, you know, everything, to the point that she took a job with us as a volunteer and would come on her own with a carer. There didn't need to be anyone else here. She knew what she was doing. And she learned all those skills in about a year, went back to school. And she'd gone back to school, I think, at a grade 7 level. And she went back in at nearly 18 and caught up in 6 months.
Wow. So, I mean, without this approach, these girls wouldn't have made so fast progress. It's a boost, right? It's a really boost.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's often for the kids that have become quite reclusive and quite isolated, you know, people ring up and they're like, it's the only thing they'll agree to come to. You are our last chance. And that's, you know, that's magic when you can, you know, then bring them down and they do engage. And they do start talking, and then they might start talking about life, you know.
Wow.
You can start to give them some tips and some guidance, and then your usual skills just kick in. But the motivating thing was coming and hanging with the horses. And we don't give a lot of pressure, you know. I'll say to parents, don't expect to see me doing much. You won't see me doing much, because it's about the child processing things. And I may say one thing at the end about some kids I talk to and we chat a lot, but for some children, they don't need that invasion. They need to work with the horse. And you might say something at the end about, you know, or what did you learn about the horse's personality? And they might say, oh, when it was naughty and it ran away, it was just like me. And you might say, okay, that's really interesting. You know, you don't tell them that. Oh, who's that like? You know, oh, does that remind you of anybody? You know, you don't need to do all that probing with some of the children. You're best just never to. And they will come up with that for themselves, and they'll tell you at the gate, I'm going to try and learn how to not run away. And you'll go, okay, let me know how it goes. Can we talk? And I'll ask them, can I have your permission to talk about that with you next time?
Wow.
Can we bring that up again? Is that okay? We can talk about that again.
Wow.
And you know, but I don't often do much. Sometimes we have one girl that comes here who goes to a special school. She's got an intellectual disability, and it's the one time of her week when she can learn independent skills on her own. She doesn't want us yakking in her ear like they do everywhere else in her life, is giving her instructions to do things. And she can do this.
Yeah, well, she doesn't need instruction. Maybe she just need to let go, right?
Yeah, and she'll feel, and she'll hug them around the neck, and she'll just stay there. She'll just stay there.
And that's enough.
Like, you need that, yeah?
And that's enough.
That's enough. That's
the power
that's
of love.
Yeah.
That's energy healing as well, right? Love is what we need the most. And when we lack, we become sick. So I believe that these animals give them love, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I think being able to talk to them about what's in their heart and what they feel for the animals, you know, and how, you know, well, how could you get that feeling back when your sister is annoying you? How can you have this feeling when you're really irritated? Because maybe this feeling could overpower that other feeling that you've said feels brown and yucky in your tummy, you know, or whatever. We do a lot of that stuff around where do you feel it and what color is it? And then how can that feeling chase that color away and put a brighter color in there, you know? So we do some of that visualization type stuff as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sarah, now, what is the next step for you? I see that you've achieved a lot already. What are you going to do? A research?
Well, you know, I am actually supposed to be writing a book. It's not really getting very far. And interestingly, even just through the journey of doing the proposal for the publisher, I was looking at equine-assisted therapy, and I've realized even through that journey that I actually want to explore more about the magic of getting people outside. Horses are great, but all animals can provide something. And even just being able to climb fences, climb a tree, make a campfire, collect wild eggs from the birds, you know, up near the dam or whatever. Even those kinds of things are so different for these kids, to be able to work with a qualified therapist in those environments. And I think it's more that I'm getting more drawn to now, is how do we, there's a movement in America called No Child is Left Inside. And I've got that in my head, let's get them outside. Let's go to the beach. Let's go to the bush. There's so much you can do in planning a bushwalk. So much you can do in, you know, planning, risk assessment, reading maps. There's so many things you can do, packing up your own lunchbox, being independent. Who are you going to call if there's an accident? Who's going to look for you if you don't get back on time? There's so much in so many outdoor activities.
All right, so that's it, Sarah. Thank you so much for this fantastic for the magic. Thank you for the magic. I feel any better now. I'm very excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And goodbye for now. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.